Welcome to this special episode of Comic Books and You. Today we're going to cover Isom number 1, also known as Ill-Advised Part 1, from Rippaverse Comics. This is going to be a fairly long one because this is a fairly long book, and there's quite a bit of things to talk about it. Let's get to it as quickly as we can. Before we begin, this is a $3.7 million project. We're talking a brand new hero, brand new company, brand new author with known names attached to it for the art and coloring and everything else, however, but still fairly new. And this was released at the end of 2022 at great fanfare in one part of the internet and great fanfare against it in another part of the internet. $3.7 million for a book, comic book, or even a regular novel, or even a biography would be a lot of money. $3.7 million is nothing to be sneering at, basically. One thing that's interesting here, we go with a target of 100K when this particular campaign launched. So 100K is about 10 times as much as you would normally see in a lot of those independent self-published books on Indiegogo, Kickstarter, or Fund My Comics. I've just started following one for an existing character, Chi. We already had a video on a comic with her in it, and the target originally was 10K, and after 4 days, it's approaching 40,000. So you have to realize here it's just the difference here in magnitude. This particular campaign, of course, included selling t-shirt, poster, hats, cool trading cards, all sorts of things. So that $3.7 million, that particular campaign had all sorts of things being sold with it. But in the end, if you look at how many books were sold, from what you can see openly on their website, would look at like about 62,000 units of the book has been sold. If I look at any book we've covered since the start of this particular series, Torgal number 1, 40 years ago, would have sold much more than that, of course. That's a bit outside of the same realm here. Most of the mangas I've covered probably are in the same range or higher. Mangas being what they are, the market in Japan is special, and the market everywhere else in the world is still massive. Outside of that, Agent Jean normally sells between 50 to 70,000 units per volume. That's about it. None of the other books we've really covered are anywhere close to these kinds of numbers. Of course, I'm looking at more recent books very often, which have very low thresholds, but still. With success brings jealousy. Isom number 1 is probably the most nitpicked, dissected, and hated book on the interwebernets. Every single panel was critiqued. Every single line of dialogue was bitched about by someone that dislikes Eric July. Every creative decision taken in this book was put under a microscope. But in this case, even if I am a fan of Eric July, he is a man I appreciate and I do believe is doing good things. And I do enjoy Isom. I will still go through the book as fair as an impartial as I normally am when going through those books. If it's the first time watching a video like this because of the subject, you have to notice I am going through this as clinically as possible. And I know some Eric July protectors will end up calling me a detractor after this. And I know some detractors will start calling me a shill. I don't really care. This is me going in as impartial as possible. As usual, we'll start with our main character and characters in this book. So we start with Avery Silman, or formerly Isom. He kind of gave up the superhero life, unfortunately, after an incident that we don't have all the details on. He comes from Florist Park, Texas, moved out to a ranch to live on his days outside of the limelight. He is a physically impressive specimen. He's not a young man. I mean, I'm used to superhero comics, especially new heroes, coming in with that teenager, really young adult kind of character. Avery, I'm not sure of his age because I don't have all the details. I don't have the document cards and all that stuff. But I would say is in his early to mid 30s. He keeps in shape by working out on his ranch that has a full training facility. And honestly, here, that would be enough. Just working on a ranch normally would be enough to keep you in a very good physical shape. Just ask Brock Lesnar as an example. We don't have the full purview of all of his powers, but from what we see in this book, super strength, super agility seem to be the main form of powers he has. He has an above average combat ability, but it doesn't look like he's trained. He's not using Jeet Kune Do, he's not using MMA, he's not using pro wrestling either. He's just a brawler, which is often enough if you're in normal combat situation. He has a lot of pride and he might have some slight anger management issues. So that's probably some of his weaknesses, at least emotionally. And he is what people in Florence Park normally call an accept. There was a few accept that we see in this book, and we're going to talk about the whole thing as we go along. The second character in this book is Altona Silman, which is Avery's younger sister and the mother of Vassie. She's an upper echelon worker at Peritext Corp, which is a big corporation in Florence Park. She's the one driving the plot forward by asking Avery to do something that brings him back into town and into the accept life. So she is a very important character in the book, even though she doesn't have a whole lot of lines overall. Our resident scumbag nightclub owner, Darren, was in the same class as Avery, old friend of his, an old homie, as they sometimes call him. He's running Club Merc, which is a nightclub in Florence Park, and seems to be a cover for a few different criminal activities. We don't have the whole list of them yet. Like I said, he's a resident scumbag. Doesn't seem to be a very nice individual overall. Doesn't also appear to be an accept, except maybe he's got, super accounting. So that's how he got to be a rich mob boss. Who knows? The next character in the list is Santwan, who is Darren's muscle for hire bouncer at his nightclub, except he's a huge man. I mean, Avery is already, pretty big and pretty impressive, but Santwan towers him by 2 heads and is probably twice as wide. He's got super strength, and I'm pretty sure super resistance because he is tough and takes the blows from Avery without too much of an issue. And super strength. Superior combatability as well. Once again, doesn't seem to be a trained fighter, mostly a brawler. And I think one of his best quote is always for hire if the price is right. I'll be honest here. After Isom, Avery, Santwan is my favorite character in this book because I like that particular archetype of character. Big, mean, ugly, and ready for action. And by that quote, always for hire if the price is right, yeah, he's working for Darren, but I'm pretty sure that he could end up on anybody's payroll, good guy, bad guy, as long as the money's there or there's a good reason for him to do it. Like I did with Vengeance of Bane, we're going to do a quick overview of the book. We're not going to review things page by page. We're not going to do a deep dive. I'm really just going to go over the story top level. And that'll allow us as well as to see what part of the stories are really important in a way. Because this book does have some issues with pacing and some issues with how things are set up. But the story still works really well once you sit down and read it, basically. I will take the artist out of the work like I normally do. Eric July did ask for minimal spoiler. I'm not going to go in big details on most things. Our friend Avery Silman seems to be a fairly successful rancher in Texas, close to Forest Park. One day his sister calls him because there's a bit of an issue. The daughter of one of their church member, Jasmine, has disappeared after she was offered a full-time job at the corporation where Altona works, Projexus. Avery kind of has to go and take care of business. This is what you do when you have a family, have friends, and someone asks you to do, even if it's something you really don't want to do, you end up doing it. So against his best wishes, Avery goes to Forest Park with his truck and goes talk to his old homie Darren, who's a powerful owner of a club, likely a mob boss, like I said, and not the kindest individual. This discussion doesn't go quite as well as it could have. Darren does offer Avery a job as someone working in the kitchen or something along those lines, showing how much real respect he has for Avery. And as that goes on, Avery just decides to take matters into his own hand and tell Darren what he thinks. He gets assaulted by the regular Iron Muscles until Sant has to be brought in because they figure out that Avery is an accept. So to fight an accept, you need an accept. That is a standard procedure in these types of books. Avery is not probably not full back into form and not quite ready to fight Sant, so he kind of gets thrown out of the club. And as he flies away in the air, he hits another superhero who is flying in the air at that point, Yaira, who's in a tussle with the current local super cops, the Alpha Corps. Avery gets his ass handed to him by Yaira. She's, well, already enraged and probably has been using her powers and fighting for a while here. She flies up, grabbing Avery, and basically chucks him down on a taxi, which hurts quite a bit. Avery gets sent to a hospital. He escapes from it, calls up his sister to pick him up, bring him back to the impound so he could get his truck back, and he plans revenge against Darren. He decides to go back to the club, meets up with Jasmine as she's around the club, tries to get some info from her, but she is very evasive and gives him the slip. And at that point, well, Avery gets into another little brawl with the local Iron Muscle because he doesn't take kindly to Darren disrespecting him. Once again, you need an accept to fight an accept, so Sant is brought back to fight him. This time, however, Avery has a few more tricks up his sleeve. It seems like he's getting back into the course of the action and fighting. He beats up the giant after getting tossed around a little bit. He does a powerful shoulder tackle, which sends Sant flying. But the cops show up and try to arrest him. Once again, I wouldn't blame them in that kind of situation. I mean, if you see two people fighting in the street, one's standing up, one's laying down, you arrest both of them and you ask question after. Avery runs away because he doesn't want to answer or be asked too many questions. And that's where we see that super agility is more than likely in the cards for him. He goes up to meet with his sister, gives him a feedback of the situation, what's going on with Jasmine, and his niece, Vasi, wakes up and they have a quick chat together, which is a very nice moment, very nice family moment in this book. Even though Avery is not a father, or at least not that we know of, it still shows that he cares for his family. He cares for Jasmine, even though she's not part of his family. He's a very caring man overall. Next morning, Avery goes to the costume shop where he used to get his costume, and he realizes that the place went from a small business to a massive organization. And he recovers his superhero costume and will get some modification made on it to increase protection. At the same time, Darren is planning a manhunt for the reuniformed Isom, and that's where this bit of the story ends. So it is a tight story if you take out some of the elements that are superfluous around it. And it's a very good introduction to the character, to the universe, and to the antagonists. You've got everything you need in there for a good story. I would like Darren to be shown to be a little bit more evil, I guess, but I still think he's a scumbag and probably the guy I hate the most in this book. But it's like in wrestling. I hate him, but it's a good kind of hate. Cover-wise, there's 3 covers for this book. I've got cover C, which is the go-to cover for this book. This is the one you can still get on the online shop. This is the one I got because I was weary of pulling the trigger because of shipping costs and taxes and fees. It's a thing that happens with international shipping. I'm in Canada. The book comes from the US. There's no Canadian distributor, obviously. It took me a little while to get to it. I should have pulled the trigger earlier, got an A, B, and C cover. instead. On this cover, you've got Alpha Core chasing Isom, something that doesn't happen in the book. So it's a cover that I find a little bit weaker because of that. It's eye-catching anyways, however. You have your heroes, your cops there. There's action going on. The background is good, and it's centered around the characters. Pretty good cover overall. The best one, however, was Isom #1, cover A. 27,000 units of this cover was produced. No more will be produced. It's eye-catching. It's interesting. Our hero is dead center with the whole panoply around it. Honestly, this would have been the one that I should have grabbed right away. It is a great looking cover. Oh, my text bad here, but doesn't matter. Cover B was not as strong as the other two, in my opinion. 17,000 units of this were produced. You have Yaira, you've got Isom in a fight, something that, it happens in the book, but never in that particular fashion. Doesn't look as appealing as the other. There's no central point to it. It's a good cover, of course, but it's not the best one of the three, and not one that would drive sales as much, I believe. I like the other two much better. Let's talk about the Peritext as usual, things that go around the book. Quality of the product here is magnificent. Let's not talk about art or story yet. Talking about the sheer quality of the product, the book as a book. Cover is thicker than regular trade paperback, better art back, and it overall uses a bit of a better quality cardboard. Pages use top of the line paper, gloss and seal, no ink bleeding. No pages sticking together like you sometimes have on some glossed paper. This is top of the line as far as production quality goes. Even the packaging that it came in was top of the line, but it comes with a bag and board, which were also higher quality and good grade. Nothing to complain about here. I asked Eric July on Twitter once if he was planning on doing an hardcover version. He said that maybe for a future edition there would be. In my opinion, it should be an option from the get-go. You should have a certain number of hardcover books available, or the option available. $10, $15 more, depending on what kind of prices you can negotiate. Some people, like me, like my best friend, whom I gave one of those books to, we both would have liked it to be hardcover instead. Maybe it's our French-Canadian and Franco-Belgian comic enthusiasm that goes with it, but I think hardcover would work really well for these types of books. We have a single ad in the book, which is an ad for Eric July's wife jewelry shop. Not my thing. I assume it's also not the thing for a lot of the readers, but happy wife, happy life. The jewelry itself doesn't look bad either. It seems to be non-metallic, so I could actually get it for my wife, who's allergic to most metals. And here, and as a side note, the ad is perfectly placed in the book. It breaks the story very neatly between Isom getting thrown onto a taxi and the rest of the book. I've rarely seen an ad better placed than this in the book. This is a nice touch here. Artistic elements. The character here are really good. Every single one of them is identifiable, and they're different enough that you can easily pick them out. And that includes your average thugs. I recognize the average thugs in the back as different characters, and that you see them through different panels. This is actually pretty interesting and pretty good. Goes over some of the faceless mooks that we have in some other comics or in manga in many cases. The range of the character is also pretty great. We've got a lot of different people showing here. Large muscular ones, not muscular one. We've got a few women, Yara, Altona, etc. One of my minor gripe here is that all the main characters are African American. I would have liked maybe a few Latinos, maybe in the mix, something along those lines. Not a huge gripe, and that's a personal thing. If you look at the other characters that were introduced, however, Yaira, the Alpha Core, you've got a wider range there. Those characters, though, I would not consider main characters in this book. They're important characters, but not main characters. I have a bit of an issue with some of the facial expressions. They are exaggerated to a point where it's closer to cartoony rather than realistic. Like here with Santwan, I'm not sure I like that particular picture. And we've got here Yaira dragging Avery up in the sky. It's infrequent, not consistent. Most of the time, the facial expressions and the facial looks are good. So I have a feeling this might have been just a case where the artist was learning to draw new characters, trying new things. It's not an artistic deal breaker, but it's something that I need to bring up. The action scenes in there are great. I'm tired of the two-panel action scenes we get in DC and Marvel. I mean, the fight starts, the fight ends. That's all we get. If we're lucky, we get a page. I want to see how the fight goes. I want to see how they're fighting, how the different participants are doing things. Yes, I can see Avery get his ass kicked and then kick San Juan's ass in two different ways. So that's pretty nice. The scenes are also not manga long. We don't have 10 pages of fighting. We don't have 15 pages of fighting with huge dialogue between the characters at the same time. Fights are fights. They're closer to what you would expect an actual fight between two people to be. Not much talking going on when you're trying to beat the other guy to a pulp. So we've got a couple of pages that are well animated, well performed. This is what it should look like. There is a few times where we have that stop motion kind of panel, like I've seen here with Yaira. You know, I don't like that type of panel. I prefer to have separate panel for the different actions being taken. That's just a gripe on my end. I know it's popular and it's a thing that is done by a lot of artists nowadays. It's just not something that I like personally. The panel work in there is also really good. The page real estate is used to the maximum. The layout is not boring. Pages are different one from the other. Full pages are used to great efficiency. Here we've got the start of the fight between San Juan and Avery. It's a full page blow up of that. And it's great. I like these kinds of shots. They give you a big picture kind of things. I haven't noted down here, but there's also a lot of bleeding panels where one image goes over a second image. This works really well, and I like that particular technique being used in a lot of panel work. It looks professional. That's what can I say? The backgrounds are fairly solid, not top of the line, but solid, especially when we compare it to lower end indie comic mangas and some of the big boy comics like we've seen in early Unstoppable Doom Patrol as an example. You've got a wide variety of things going on in the backgrounds. They're simple, but they work. Simple but work is what I like when we're looking at backgrounds. Overly detailed backgrounds can be great as well in limited quantities. We have mechanical work in there, cars, pickup trucks, regular city vehicles. It's not incredible, it's not imaginative, it's not Roger Leloup level. It does what it's supposed to do. Nowadays, doing this is fairly easy. We've got reference material everywhere on the internet for vehicles. So I would expect most modern artists to be able to do it fairly well. The only reservation I have in terms of mechanical work is this shot of Avery being slammed on the taxi. Not sure if it's a taxi, actually. It just looks like a yellow car. Guess all yellow cars are taxis in my head. The proportions seem to be a little bit off on that one. Not sure why. It just seems off to my mind. I've seen this particular type of shots a few times. Great Teacher Onizuka has a few of them, actually, as an example. And this one seems off. If the vehicle was crumpled under the impact, I think it wouldn't have thrown off my proportions here. It might just be a stylistic choice. It might just be how he's falling. Maybe he's falling with the lower back lower than the legs. I'm not 100% sure here, but something seems off with that picture. Were superpowers necessary in this book? No. You can remove every single supernatural elements in this book, and the story is just as good. Later comics will probably change this, but right now, with what we have, this is a tight ground level pulp story with people flying around for some reason. Avery being strong, Avery being agile. I mean, I've seen that from Bob Moran a million times before. And Bob Moran doesn't have superpowers. Well, normally he doesn't. Once again, I could have seen this book as a pulp story rather than a superhero story. Another very nice thing here is that the race and gender and everything else of our characters don't come into play. They are what they are. We judge them on what they're doing and not by who they are, what they are, etc. We just judge them by how they're acting throughout the story, which is refreshing compared to a lot of, once again, big boy comics. Avery is a representation of self-reliance to the extreme. He wants to get out of the accept life, and to do so, he builds himself a new life outside of town. But he seems to have grown from the past, and he does rely on others for help a little bit throughout the story. And I think it's going to be one of the things that define his character. He's going to learn that he can accept other people's help. He has a lot of room to grow, even though he is, once again, an older gentleman. However, he goes after Darren because of his earth pride, not because of a desire for justice, peace, truth, or libertarian way. Avery's pride was hurt when Darren kicked him out of his club and didn't answer his question, and that's why he wants to go back and get answers. Darren is a scumbag, but he's a very nice character overall, mostly because he's a self-made man, he's successful, and he's got the same issues as our main character. He has a lot of hubris. It's a nice dichotomy. Both characters have the same flaw and the same background in a way. They're both self-made men with a lot of pride. Let's see how those two will collide and what the resulting effect will be. Importance of family and tight-knit communities here is very important. Avery's helping his sister to find someone from the church because, well, that woman from the church was really nice and he doesn't want to disappoint his mom. He's reluctant to it, but it's important to him to do the right thing. This is a good moral message to give to our readers, and our readers can identify with it. And younger readers can understand that this is a good thing, is something that we need to emulate. The police in this are generally shown as doing their job, not in a negative or positive light. They're just the police. Alpha Corps trying to get their hands on Yaira. We don't know why, but Yaira doesn't seem to be that kind of a person, attacking the cops herself as soon as we meet her and the cops. The three khaki bozos don't look like bad guys. They're just on the job. They're cops. They do what cops need to do, and that's catch criminals. Now, a few negatives. We have a lot of dangling threads. I understand that this is an introductory comic to the universe, but there's a lot of things going on top of the actual story that for some people it could get confusing. Tighter writing could have been needed. Maybe an editor going through and chopping things a little bit or modifying things a little bit. I'm really sorry. I'm actually saying an editor is useful every once in a while, as long as the editor is doing a job of addition and not trying to impose a vision, ideology, or impose anything on the author. If you look at editors in manga, you'll see how editors should be working. If you look at editors at DC and Marvel, you'll see how editors are not supposed to be working, basically. We don't know what an accept is. I had a few friends that read my copy of Isom that asked that question. The one I gave to my best friend, he had the same question at the end of it. My 11-year-old was a bit confused by it as well. Would we need a wall of exposition? No. What we would probably have needed here is a fairy tale or Mashley kind of one-pager, just in Forest Park there are accepts who are exceptional human beings, something along those lines, just to give us a grasp as to the super element in this story is. Does it kill the story? Absolutely not. But it would have helped with reading comprehension for some people, I am sure. Violence is used as the primary resolution method throughout this book. That's not a message I generally want or like to have in a general audience. Generally, we would like something like wits, cunning, saving the day rather than brute power. Once again, I have a feeling this is something that will grow over time. Who knows? We'll see how it goes as the next books are being released. Even as an introductory comic to the universe, it doesn't commit the sin of introducing too many things too quickly. We don't have the wall of exposition. We don't have the tragic backstories. We don't have the horrible flashback to, oh, in my youth, I was doing this. It's a contained story. We don't need to know where a lot of the powers come from. Like I said, I would have liked to know there are superpowers. What's going on about that? But how we got the powers? Not important in this case. The story is tightly packed, neatly packed. It's normal in a lot of those graphic novels to get to a point where, like, okay, this is where issue 1 ends, this is where issue 2 ends, this is where issue 3 ends. There we go. But this book was never crafted for the floppy market, so this is one story over 96 pages. There isn't much breathing room in this book. I feel that there could have been some situation where you could have let the situation breathe, a little bit more dialogue, a little bit more character work, a little bit more interaction between Altona and Avery, maybe something along those lines, just to let the story breathe, just slow down a little bit, and then kick back into gear. Not terrible. Once again, I'm nitpicking, I guess, but it's a thing that I find could have used a little bit of work. 96 page is long for a first comic, and even using my standard matrix and conversion from one comic type to another, that's a 72 page bande dessinée. So about twice the length of a regular book. Is that a bad thing? Not really. Agent Jean has books around that length numerous times. Volumes in the Agent Jean are about the same as well. I find that this is a format that works as long as you do still regular releases. Yes, I'm comparing Isom to Agent Jean. Alexa didn't have the original success of Eric July, but nowadays he is probably one of the other North American comic artists that's actually selling in these kinds of numbers. If we got the same kind of market penetration for Isom as we did with Agent Jean, we'd probably be talking about 1 million to 1.5 million books sold. That's why I do see that Alexa is still, a bigger name, but that's just pure market penetration. Okay, let's go through that market penetration calculation here. I know market people, I'm not talking to marketing people here or market people, but Alexa basically sells a book for every 100 person in Quebec. So 1% of the population of Quebec, 8.7 million, normally has access to an Alexa book. If you had the same kind of market for Isom, 1 out of 430 million, 1% of that would be an insane number, and no comic artist would be able to sell that kind of books. Not nowadays, at least. But if you had a comparable penetration in the target market, I'm pretty sure those books could sell in the million and a half range. Final thoughts. While this is billed as an American comic, it is much closer to a pulp bande dessinée from Europe. Recent ones are very much like this. You've got one story split in multiple books rather than a book per story like Old Bob Moran. Nowadays, you've got a lot more of those 3-4 book series, and sometimes the character gets recycled for a second series, a third series, etc. This is much closer to that particular format, and I think it's a format that really works, especially with the kind of release schedule that we can see from Isom and many indie comics. Once every year, once every 9 months would be a very reasonable kind of turnaround time. A problem I have with many modern artists, especially in the indie sphere, a lot of them just copy the manga style. But they copy the manga style without the manga's work ethics or the manga's release schedules. This doesn't work if you're doing manga style art, basically. While the violence in this is rather brutal, I don't mind my kids reading it. There's nothing in there that's objectionable. It's gritty, yes. Maybe PG-13, probably PG. Okay? It might not be the original idea behind it, but it's not a book that I would stop kids from reading. When my 11-year-old grabbed it originally, I was like, ooh, I'm not sure. And then I was like, yeah, there's nothing in there that I don't want him to see or that he hasn't seen already. Upcoming this year, we've got Isom number 2, Alpha Core number 1, Yaira number 1. I think they're all written. I think they're in production now. That is very good. It's shaping up better than a lot of indie comics in the universe, and compared to a lot of indie comics from Indiegogo, Kickstarter, Fun Night Comic, etc., we actually get our releases. And when by that I mean the book campaign starts, it's an actual pre-order campaign or an order campaign. I want X number of books shipped to me. As a customer, as a retailer, you pass your order. At the end of the campaign, it ships. Apparently, for Isom number 2, during the campaign, it's going to start shipping. This is going to be a very good thing. And while not everybody has the fortitude of an Eric July in terms of the sales here, honestly, this is how comic book campaigns should go. not, well, you place your you place your order or your funding on Indiegogo, and yeah, we should be shipping by September 2023. In November, you get the first email saying that they're late, and by 2024, you get the info that, well, the printer are late, and then by the middle of 2024, they start shipping. That shouldn't happen, and it shouldn't be a thing. And I'm not trying to shame anyone, but it doesn't work if you keep doing that. The standard should be what Rippaverse Comic is doing. So I thank you very much for listening. Keep on reading comics, keep on enjoying them. I'll keep analyzing them, and I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.